Welcome back on a new episode. In this video we are going to review lower level tests for React with Vitest and Vite. So with lower level tests I'm meaning we are going to write unit tests and integration for frontend. Usually we are covering end-to-end tests with some frameworks such as Selenium or for example Playwright, but I want to touch this important topic that developers should be responsible also for covering their code, and we are going to review how to do that. Let's start. We are going to use React, that's a framework for building UI applications. Next we are going to use Vite, which from French means quick, and that's what actually it does. It provides quick response for building dev servers with native JS module support over building command that helps you to bundle your code and make it production ready. So last component is Vitest based on V, and we are going to use it to cover our React code integration and unit tests. First, let's install our basic modules. First of all, we are going to use Vite to install everything in place. Let's open our code and let's launch the command npm create vitest, and the topic of our application is fetching weather from API and showing one-page application with weather from our location. It will be simple one component where we will cover it with both tests. And let's start. Let's call it vitest-weather, and we are going to use React TypeScript. Use roll down Vite. No, we are not interested in. Install with npm and start now. No. Now we are ready to go to our created folder, and here inside the folder we will see what actually we have. Opening package.json, we will find some default command like Vite for building our code, and also React is in place. Jest-dom is also in place. Next, what we need to do is we need to add actually our testing libraries, and what we are going to use is Vitest itself. We are going to use testing library React for helper functions, and we are going to use jest-dom for our UI environment inside the tests. Let's install. Packages are in place. Now let's start from Vite configuration. Let's open it, and now we see only plugin React here, and we need to adjust it with our test configuration. Let's copy paste our test, and here we will see we will need environment jest-dom. That's an environment where our tests are going to run. We will be using globals, variables for our Vitest, so TypeScript knows about that, and we're going to have setup file with additional configuration, and finally we state which test files we need to include and state as a test itself. We will see TypeScript error, no overload matches. That's because we need to import define config from Vite. Now I see it's in place, and let's override it with define config vitest config. Now we should be good to go. Next step will be adjusting our package.json, and let's create our test command. For that we will need just pass test and vitest. So by calling this command we will be able to run our tests. It's time to review our React application. We will have some default config, and we will have some default files after installation. First of all, it's index.html. We will see here we include source main file, and let's open it. Heading to source. Next we are opening our main test6, and we will see here our strict mode app allocation. Let's open our app tier 6. App tier 6 contains with some default stuff which we are not interested in right now, and we are going to remove all of this and redefine our own code. Basically, we are going to have only one component, which we are called weather, and this component is going to be rendered on the main page, and that's it. We have a class named container and weather component. As we can see here, we will have an error. That's because we still didn't define our component weather. Let's do it. Create folder components. And then inside we will need to create our new file, which we will call weather tsx. And inside we'll build our component. I'll copy paste the code which I already prepared, and let me just rename it a bit. Let's go one by one. Here we are also including our API fetching code, which is still not in place. But basically we are going to use separate API utils method, which are going to call to third-party service to get weather data. And then this weather data we are going to use on our page. And let me quickly create this weather API. Create a new folder API. And here we have new file, weather API TypeScript. Here I'll provide you the code. First of all, we define our custom type, which is called weather response, which contains current weather, temperature, and wind speed. As for the sources, we are going to use fetch with some open data. Let me copy paste it and open in our browser. Here you can see I have defined exact long latitude and longitude to get the weather from Berlin in our case, but you can do it for whatever place you wish. And you can actually parse the data and get like wind direction, wind speed, temperature. We are interested in temperature. And so if we get back to our code, we are fetching our data, and if response is not okay, we are throwing an error, and finally we are returning JSON. Simple example, as simple as that. Let's save it and let's open back our component. Inside the component we still using fetch weather. As you remember, we are returning our data, and that data contains current weather and temperature. If we are opening our response, we will see current weather, and finally we will see temperature key with some value. That should be it. And next we are using basically defining our component, and this component will provide a temperature and send temperature methods and some error states, as well as loading and set loading states. We will use effect, fetching data, then using this data we will set temperature, and finally we'll try to make sure that everything loading fine. If we are still in loading state, we will show loading weather, and if error, we are throwing an alert stating that there is a failure during the load. Finally, we have some small div and h1, which we will present our data with the temperature. That should be it. Let me switch back to our code, but first let me find out the reason why we have this error. Let's redefine the import of our fetch weather, and it should fix the problem. Add import from API weather API, and we should be good to go. Next step, let's switch to our app CSS. We will add some styles. So app CSS contains some default states, and we are going to add our own for container and for weather card. It's some default basic styles, we are not really interested in them, it's just to have some nice view. Next, let's see if we can run our application. For that, let's open package.json and let's find a command which actually run dev command. So for that, npm run dev, sorry, npm run dev should does the job. And we have an error. That's good, let's review it. Let's open a file with an error. In our case it's main ts6. And we see here problem with import statements. Let's just remove it and re-import. Quick fix, add import. So it should be better right now. Let's save it and let's try again. Let's stop it and let's run again. We will see our localhost URL address. And we are able to see our data, but we have some problems with the styles. Let me just quickly head back and remove all the default styles which we have. So we copy paste our container. Let me just remove it and let's reload the page. Let's stop and rebuild it. Let's open it. Next problem which I spotted is index CSS. We are not needed here right now, and finally we will see our beautiful message. Now let's time to cover it with a test. Before we even start with our test, let me just recommend you one nice plugin for Vitest. It's called in the same way as our plugin Vitest, and just I recommend you to install and launch and test will be so much easier for you. For that, we are going to write our first test, unit test for our weather API. And we are going to create new file, weather API test.ts. And now I'm going to paste test code which I prepared for this case, and we are going to explore it right now. And in order to fix it, in order to let TypeScript know about all these types from our Vitest, we need to adjust our TypeScript configuration file and include intertypes our Vitest types, Vitest globals. So TypeScript knows that set variables are defined globally. Now we don't have that error message anymore, and we should be able to see the test itself. First of all, we are importing our weather fetch, and we are defining a stub. Stub is a mechanism which allows you to rewrite some global variable and return some results instead of exact calling of this variable. So in our case, we are defining our fetch, redefining our fetch which defined globally, and we are mocking results which are going to return in JSON format and current weather temperature 21. As you remember, just as a JSON response as we have from our API. Now we want to verify that when we are fetching our weather, we are returning exactly 21, and that's it. Test as is, simple and fast, and you are able to verify the data, that you propagate data properly. Next test throws an error when response is not fine. Also simple test, and we are specially returning awk false and expecting to throw an error failed to fetch weather. Now we should be able to test our file. To run our test manually, we can open a new terminal, and we are going to use npm run test as we defined it earlier in package.json. As we can see, we are missing our test file. That's interesting. Let's open package.json and verify if we have it in place. We do definitely have it, but it says that test is missing. Interesting. Alright, of course it's missing because we are in a wrong directory. Let's head to vitest-weather and let's run it again. And we see one error because there is no setup ts. Right, let's edit. We are expecting to have setup ts under test folder, but we don't have it. Let's define it inside the source folder. Inside the source folder, we are defining our setup file, where we will have only one single import for now, and that will be jest-dom, needed exactly for running our test inside this environment. And let's open our test again and let's just run it again and see what we are going to have right now. We're still lacking because we need to change source test path inside our Vite configuration. Let's remove test and we see immediately two test paths. We see test files 1, test 2. Let's open it and verify that we are doing everything properly. Let's change it to 22. Now it should fail. And yes, we definitely see a failure expected to 21, but we got 22. So first two unit tests for our API are ready. Let's switch to our component test. For components, we are going to create a test inside the component. So I propose you to keep the test nearby the code. It's easier to see and verify which files are partially covered and which are not. Next, let's create a file, weather test ts6, and let's copy paste the code which we are going to view in right now. First of all, couple of imports, but we need to mock. So we are mocking our service API, which we already tested previously. And next we are defining that we are spying on weather API with fetch weather method called. We need to resolve it with response like current weather temperature 22. We are rendering our weather component and expecting first of all to have loading weather statement to be in a document, and next we are expecting to have a temperature to 22 Celsius. Second test, we are rendering error state when our API returns an error, and same stuff, we are defining spy on and rejection with API error. As you remember, we already defined that we need to have an alert, and that's what we're expecting, to have an alert with a text failed to load weather. As simple as that. Let's save it, and as we can see, our weather component successfully passed. Let's make sure that we don't write some mess, and let's change expectation and verify that our test is actually failing with wrong expectation. Saving it, and yes, two tests failed, which means that our expectation working properly and our mocking also working properly. So let's change it back and verify again. We should be good. The last step will be writing tests for our app file. This is not required, but when you don't have a lot of components, you just can make sure that uploads them properly. And let's just create a test. As we have only one component, it should be easy to cover it as well. Let's call it test and ts6, and let's copy paste our file, our code. And here what we are going to do is mocking fetch in the same way as previously, stop global fetch, and we are going to return our prepared response, current weather temperature 17. Then we are rendering app, and as our app contains only one component, we should be able to see on the screen 17 Celsius. And let's verify. We see test is green, but let's make sure that we don't have false positive results. Let's change it to the wrong value, and we see our test fail, which means our fetching and mocking working properly, and we are testing exact data as we expected. That's very important. Quality shouldn't be just on QA shoulders. It should be requirement for the full team, starting from developer, finishing on product owner. Everyone should be responsible for the quality and doing its job. For example, developers should be involved in testing as early as possible, the same as QAs. QA could help to build scenarios, and developers could help to build tests on lower levels. As we can see, writing unit test or integration tests is simple as a few command lines plus 10-20 lines of code, and that's it. Nowadays you will have AI help which will help you to write any tests and any functions in literally seconds.